Bin Laden is dead. Bin Laden is dead. Confirmed, urgent confirmed. Bin Laden is dead. Multiple sources. Osama bin Laden is dead. Happy days. Happy days, everybody. Yeah. This is the greatest. Give me a wide shot of the general. This is the greatest night of my career. The bum is dead. The savage who hurt us so grievously. And I am so blessed. I'm so privileged to be at this desk.
Who's Osama bin Laden?
Come on, Andrew. You should know who Osama bin Laden is. He's a very important part in America's history. Let me get you this Blu-ray that'll explain it to you.
In moments like this, they are coming in all the time, that there have been attacks in 2 American cities, New York and in Washington. The trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And there, as you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing.
While its beginnings are arguable, the War on Terror has remained an integral part of U.S. policy. After September 11, 2001, the financier behind the attack, Osama bin Laden, was brought into the limelight, and the chaos that ensued has shaped America drastically. Bin Laden's September 11, 2001 attack created an atmosphere of fear among Americans and united them under the search to find the instigator of such an attack. Because Americans wanted to bring Osama bin Laden to justice, President Bush declared the War on Terror and set out to find and kill bin Laden. The war cost America trillions of dollars, but in the beginning, the war seemed justified. As the war progressed, technology evolved to suit the needs of the terrorist seekers, and the religion of Islam was seen as a violent and dangerous religion in America. After the death of Osama, Americans were again united, and President Obama was seen as a national hero.
Many people believe that modern terrorism began after the attack of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, and that this was the first time Osama bin Laden had attempted to terrorize the United States. This is a common misconception, however, as Osama's terrorist ideals began forming in 1979 following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It is important to trace back Osama's life to understand his ultimate emergence as the key figure behind the war on terror. Following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1985, Osama bin Laden took his family's wealth and organized the Islamic Salvation Foundation, more famously known as Al-Qaeda, which means the base in Arabic. After the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, bin Laden worked for his family and supported Islamic militant groups. It wasn't until 1991 that bin Laden began focusing on the United States as his primary target of terror. In 1991, Osama bin Laden moved to the much welcoming Sudan, and due to feelings of abandonment during the Persian Gulf War, he sought to decrease Western influence in the Middle East. Beginning in 1991, Osama's goal of terrorizing the United States truly began and gained momentum quickly. In 1993, bin Laden's business interests funded Egyptian extremists, and he was linked to the World Trade Center bombing, which killed 6 people. Soon, bin Laden's attacks increased in size and occurrence. Between the years of 1995 and 1996, Osama bin Laden was linked to the bombings in Saudi Arabia, where 22 U.S. citizens were killed, and later he moved back to Afghanistan.
Bin Laden's actions have, at different times, both unified and divided the American people. After the events that took place on September 11, 2001, Americans rallied behind President Bush, united both by fear and righteous indignation. Bin Laden was seen as the person who could be brought to justice and be held accountable for the heinous acts committed on 9/11. Patriotism became rampant as people, overcome with rage, wanted to bring terrorists to justice. Middle Eastern countries were seen as terrorist zones, and many Americans wanted these areas to be cleansed of such terror. This undoubtedly divided the American public between extreme patriotism and ignorance, with no middle ground. Though in general they initially supported the war on terror, as more and more money was spent and more lives were lost, America grew increasingly divided on the issue. Faith was again restored, though for some this faith was fleeting, for many Americans in their government after Osama's death. American patriotism again shined through, just as it had in the days following September 11th. America became a place where everyone felt united, and no one was a stranger, because all were celebrating the death of the most infamous terrorist in the world.
Religion is the driving force behind modern religious terrorism. The modern period of religious terrorism began with the goal of stopping the spread of Western influence into Islamic countries. Osama bin Laden organized al-Qaeda to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. Later, religion led al-Qaeda to fight against Westerners who were in Islamic countries. Mujahideens, also known as holy warriors, were soldiers recruited by bin Laden to stop non-believers from entering an Islamic world. Religious terrorists use their religion as a way to justify killing many people. Killing non-believers is seen as a way to get to paradise.
Osama bin Laden was an influential Islamic leader, and half of the Muslim country's population had confidence in his judgment. The people's trust in Osama bin Laden enabled him to issue a fatwa. This fatwa, or interpretation of religious law, called on all Muslims to fight against Americans and their allies whenever they could. This fatwa originated from Osama bin Laden's belief that the United States was beginning to control too much of the Muslim world. Not all Muslims believe this religious fatwa. In fact, most do not. However, ever since the beginning of religious terrorism, tension between Islam and the rest of the world has increased. This tension is not new. Certain Islamic laws are seen as inappropriate to Westerners. For example, the treatment of women. War is extremely expensive, and the U.S. policy towards the war on terror has drained the U.S. economically. Upon declaring the war on terror, George Bush so confidently said, "Whatever it costs to defend our country, we will pay." Once the war was declared, Bush's increase in the defense budget was the greatest it had been in 20 years. This budget doubled funding for Homeland Security, mainly focused on bioterrorism, emergency response, airport and border security, and improved intelligence, such as the CIA and FBI. Bush was inaugurated president during a time of relative prosperity in America, and during those times when riches were abundant, a war on terror seemed justified and a good decision, with the high rise in patriotism in the country after the September 11th attack. 10 years and $3 trillion later, the war didn't seem like such a good idea. With a budget of about $30 million a month and the greatest recession since the Great Depression, the war on terror has helped America sink into a $13 trillion deficit.
Prior to the war on terror, the Muslims felt that the Palestinian Muslims were being treated unfairly by the world community. That and the presence of military bases in the Arab world upset many Arab Muslims and prompted them to fight against Western influence. This in turn created a tumultuous political relationship between the United States and most Middle Eastern countries. Following the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, George Bush declared the war on terror. The war in Afghanistan started in 2001 and was authorized by votes of 98-0 in the Senate and 420-1 in the House of Representatives, and was supported by 88% of Americans. Bush had just entered office, and declaring this war made him seem powerful and in control during a period of time when everyone was frantic and discombobulated. U.S. politics, following the declaration of war, sent a very clear message to other countries: either join the U.S. against the fight on terror or be deemed the bad guy. Furthermore, the war on terror was partly justified by the destruction of the totalitarian regimes in the name of democracy. America was set to shut down terrorist camps and bring terrorists to justice. This polarized the world much in the same way the Cold War had. Bush increased the defense budget and passed the USA Patriot Act in 2001 to give government the right to accuse and regulate suspected terrorists. Bush's harsh tactics against Middle East countries, beginning with Afghanistan and leading to Iraq, did deter terrorism to some extent. However, it created even harsher tensions among terrorist groups in the U.S. In the beginning of the war on terror, Bush was supported wholeheartedly. However, towards the end of his term, government began growing tired of his endless search for Osama. As Bush left office and Obama was inaugurated, Obama set to finish the search that Bush had begun and to end the war on terror once and for all. Obama took much of the advances that Bush had already achieved and used them to his benefit, and on May 1, 2011, with the presidential re-election around the corner, Obama announced that Osama had been killed. Millions of Americans rejoiced and thanked the president for his role in the murder of such a man, and Obama was seen as a national hero.
Technology has been greatly advanced every year. Many of these new technological achievements have helped catch terrorists and stop their activities. Predator drones were commonly used to precisely destroy Al-Qaeda targets. Even though many unmanned drones were used, special forces such as Green Berets and Navy SEALs often carried out missions against Al-Qaeda. Ubiquitous computing, when computers are integrated into our daily lives, has helped collect mass amounts of information, known as data mining. One example of data mining is the Total Informational Awareness Project, directed by a part of the Department of Defense. Data mining can collect information from many sources, telephones, ATMs, and the internet. All the information collected can be used to identify terrorists, although many people believe this form of data mining is an invasion of individual privacy.
Living in a generation where terrorism is all that I've known, my decisions and thoughts have been influenced by the acts of terrorists like Osama bin Laden. Even though Osama bin Laden is dead, terrorism will undoubtedly continue into the future, and the world will have to respond one way or another.